Chair recognizes the gentleman from Edmondson for explanation of the bill and a motion thereon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 551 is the sports wagering bill. This bill's been talked about quite a bit this session, and there have been efforts dealing with this for roughly the last 4 years in this body since the PASPA Act of 1992 was overturned by the United States Supreme Court. What the Supreme Court overturning that act did was it allowed individual states to regulate and make legal a program of sports wagering within the boundaries of their state. Since that time, 36 states and the District of Columbia have legalized some form of sports wagering within their borders. You'll probably hear a little bit today about the potential of this being an expansion of gaming. However, I want to bring out a few statistics. The American Gaming Association estimates that there are a little over $1.1 billion wagered annually on illegal and unregulated marketplaces within the Commonwealth of Kentucky each year. And when I say illegal and unregulated marketplaces, I'm talking about two sources. I'm talking about websites that operate offshore, and about 80% of the people that use those sites believe that those sites are legal because they can access them from their phone or from the internet. And I'm also talking about folks who bet with actual bookies across the state. And if you read about the history of Kentucky, especially in some of the regions of the state, you'll find that there's a pretty colorful history of bookies across our Commonwealth. Since PASPA, the other thing that I want to mention is that 6 of our 7 border states have legalized and regulated a program of sports wagering. Not only have 6 of our 7 border states done that, but 46 counties of the 120 counties in Kentucky border a state that has legalized sports wagering within their borders. And you literally just have to drive across the county line or cross the river to go take part in their programs. In fact, sometimes you don't even have to cross the river. I've heard from folks in Jefferson County who know the exact parking lot on River Road where you can go, bounce off an Indiana cell phone tower, and you can place your wager without crossing the river, without paying the toll. But all these systems do have geofencing, and they're pretty strong systems in doing that. Just a little data from the GeoComply websites that they provided to us as we've worked on this bill. During the last NFL season, there were over 5 million GeoComply checks in Kentucky tied to approximately 181,000 individual unique Kentuckians' accounts trying to bet in the legal marketplace in jurisdictions just outside our borders. That's in addition to the $1.1 billion estimated in the illegal, unregulated marketplace. Just during the month of January, and the state of Ohio just legalized their program and went live in January, there was $1 billion bet in their program for 1 month. And during that time, there were over a million checks associated with 58,000 unique accounts just in the first month of the Ohio program tied to Kentuckians. There was a study done in 2020 that used what our program would look like, and it actually included what was in previous bills, online poker and fantasy sports, which I have backed out from the study that was done by Commonwealth Economics, and just attached it to the sports wagering piece that estimated the total handle in Kentucky would be somewhere between $2.3 and $2.4 billion each year. And again, I told you when we started, $1 billion bet in the illegal and unregulated marketplace, plus all the folks who are betting in the border states that have easy access to those. Projected tax revenue per that study was $22.3 million each year. At this time, Mr. Speaker, I would like to call House Committee Substitute 1 to House Bill 551.
Clerk, please report.
House Committee Substitute 1 to House Bill 551.
Gentleman from Edmondson.
The House committee substitute that was passed in committee made a technical correction to ensure that service providers and the tracks can contract to run the on-site books, that the tracks themselves don't actually have to do that, that they can contract with a service provider. It also takes out a provision, and this is a more substantial provision, that removes the 12-month in-person registration requirement for someone to go and register their online account at one of the actual in-person locations. And that's important because if you look at what's happened in the marketplace across the country since these states have started to legalize sports wagering, you'll find that every state has now gotten rid of their in-person requirement to register accounts, I think with the exception of Nevada. Language also allows sports wagering at simulcasting facilities where wagering is already happening, but they must use the partnering organizations that the tracks that they're already contracted with are using to stay in compliance there. And it also has a technical correction to allow the suspension or revocation of occupational licenses for bad actors who don't follow the rules and regulations of the Racing Commission who will be policing this activity. So at this time, Mr. Speaker, if there be no questions on the sub, I would move passage of House Committee Sub 1 to House Bill 551.
Question before the body is passage of House Committee Substitute 1 to House Bill 551. Is there any discussion on the committee sub? Seeing none, those in favor signify by voting aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. House Committee Substitute 1 is adopted. Gentleman from Edmondson.
This time, Mr. Speaker, I would like to ask for a suspension of the rules to hear House Floor Amendment 5, which was filed earlier today.
Motion of the gentleman from Edmondson is for suspension of the rules for the purpose of allowing House Floor Amendment 5 to be heard and voted upon. Motion is non-debatable, requires constitutional majority of 51. Those in favor of suspension of the rules, vote aye. Roll call is open for your vote. Clerk will take the roll. Being 84 members voting aye, the rules are suspended for the purpose of allowing House Floor Amendment 5 to be in order. Gentleman from Edmondson.
Mr. Speaker, I ask that House Floor Amendment 5 be reported by the clerk.
Clerk, please report.
House Floor Amendment 5 to House Bill 551.
Gentleman from Edmondson.
And I think it has been pushed to your computers. Is that correct?
It has been.
House Floor Amendment 5 contains the entirety of House Floor Amendment 4 that was filed on Friday and has been out for the entire weekend. It also does a few other things, and I'll mention what it did with House Floor Amendment 5 as well. There was a technical correction fixing a missed section citation on the simulcasting language. On Friday or Thursday afternoon, Appropriations and Revenue staff had also flagged some language that they wanted to clarify with regard to who the taxpayer was, whether that be the track or the service provider, and they've cleaned that language up. That was all from the Floor Amendment 4 on Friday that we carried forward. The substantive thing in this bill, though, or this amendment that you see before you is the gentleman from Jefferson 46 has been a very, very strong proponent of problem gambling legislation and has filed a bill on that. We've also heard from members across the Capitol and the Senate about the need or their concern about that issue. And so we went back and pulled language on that to allow for 2.5% of the tax revenue that comes in from this to be dedicated to a problem gaming fund that's created in Floor Amendment 5. There's also a couple of other technical corrections with regard to plural versus singular statements, as well as a technical correction just to ensure that this does not interfere with some other legislation that has passed already the House this session. That's the explanation of House Floor Amendment 5. Be happy to answer any questions. If there are no questions, I would move passage of House Floor Amendment 5 to House Bill 551.
Motion is for the adoption of House Floor Amendment 5. Is there any discussion of the floor amendment? Seeing none, those in favor signify by voting aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. House Floor Amendment 5 is adopted. Gentleman from Edmondson.
Now for a final run through on the bill. This does create a regulated marketplace for sports wagering, taking sports wagering in Kentucky out of the shadows, out of the darkness, and moving it into the light. It establishes a sports wagering administration fund that's a restricted fund and pays for the regulation of the industry out of that fund. It also creates the problem gaming fund that I just spoke about in the floor amendment, now that we've amended the bill with that, another restricted fund to take care of those efforts. But it sends the balance of all dollars left after those two things are paid to the Kentucky Permanent Pension Fund. It makes the Kentucky Horse Racing Commission the regulator with exclusive jurisdiction over sports wagering in the Commonwealth. They have a proven track record of policing wagering and sporting events in the state. Under the licensing, 9 tracks in Kentucky can be licensed for a $500,000 initial fee and for $50,000 for their annual renewals. And those 9 tracks can each contract with up to 3 service providers who would pay an initial fee of $50,000 and a $10,000 annual renewal fee as well. Those would be your service providers that would actually run the in-person books or provide the online and mobile sites that would be licensed through the tracks. The Racing Commission must establish a system within 6 months of the effective date of this act, and it would also provide for occupational licensing for the individual folks working in the sports wagering space, both through the online systems and at the in-person books, to be regulated by the Horse Racing Commission, much like the occupational licensing at our racetracks for wagering employees there as well. Taxes are charged on the adjusted gross revenue associated with these transactions, and that is defined in this bill as the dollar amount of wagers placed less the amount of winnings paid out, less a small federal excise tax that's charged on sports wagering to get to your adjusted gross revenue. And adjusted gross revenue for in-person transactions would be taxed at 9.75%, and on online or mobile sites, 14.25%. Those rates are in line and competitive, above some of the rates in surrounding states, lower than some of the states in surrounding states, but right in line and competitive with what's going on in our 6 of our 7 border states. The bill also does provide a prohibition on tampering with the outcome of a sporting event and creates a Class C felony tied to that. It prohibits employees of tracks or service providers from betting with the company they work for, and that's governed under the occupational license statutes and would allow for a suspension or revocation of a license. And it also prohibits a sporting event participant from wagering on the event that they are participating in and creates a Class A misdemeanor for that. There is an LRC fiscal note that says we bring in approximately $22.96 million annually in tax revenue once we reach full implementation, and in the 23-24 fiscal year, $10,900,000 for that year. That is the rundown of the bill. I would be happy to answer any questions that anyone might have, but if not, I would move passage of House Bill 551 as amended by House Committee Substitute 1 and House Floor Amendment 5.